Hello and welcome to my 1992 Volvo 240 station wagon. It's my daily driver and it's a 32-year-old car. It's fantastic in almost every way, but I can't help but notice that everybody else on the road now seems to have these super bright LED headlights, and relative to them it feels like my stock lights are pretty dim. So today I'm going to find out, can you have good headlights in an old car like this? To find out, I'll be testing the best of the old school high wattage halogens versus modern LEDs. Of course, this is partly about which one is the brightest, but there's also a cost-benefit analysis as well as personal preference. Which one do I like better on this vintage Volvo? First things first, before we go testing bulbs, it's really important to have good lenses, good reflectors, everything nice and clean and clear. These cars originally came with plastic headlight lenses in North America, and they always would turn yellow and fade. Whereas in Europe, they got these beautiful glass lenses with a much better beam pattern. So I actually bought these from a guy in the Netherlands and had them shipped over. So definitely an extra expense, but they're much better looking, much better beam pattern, and they're gonna stay clear because they're glass. It's also important to properly aim your headlights before doing any comparisons like this. The super short version is find a nice flat piece of ground with a wall where you can drive right up to it. Mark the center positions of both lights, vertically and horizontally. Then back up 25 feet. You'll want to measure 2 inches down from the center line and adjust your low beam cutoff so it's about here. Find something to cover up one light at a time so you can concentrate on the one you're adjusting. Essentially, you want the brightest area to be centered on the vertical line and the top of the brightest area to touch the bottom horizontal line. Then of course repeat on the other side and fine-tune as needed. I'll put a link in the description to a much more in-depth guide on how to aim headlights. But now that everything's looking good, let's go for a baseline drive and see how dim these stock 55 watt bulbs are. I'll be using the same exact camera settings for all of these tests just to make sure we get a somewhat scientific result. And as you can see, these stock bulbs don't make that much impact on the environment. It's actually kind of hard to see in the city when everyone else's lights are so bright. And even on a quiet country road, these don't really light the environment up very much, so not ideal. When you're researching what headlight bulbs to get, every aftermarket company makes big claims about brightness and lumens and that they're the best one and everyone else is terrible. How do you actually decide? Well, unbiased third-party testers. I came across a site called Bulb Facts. I'm not affiliated with them at all, but I found their site to be really helpful. They do LEDs and halogens and HIDs and all the most popular types of bulbs. They have basically a laboratory setup to test them all in the same exact conditions, so you can get more of a realistic result for which ones perform better. That's actually how I decided on the Flosser halogen bulbs, because they were rated as one of the brightest halogens. So here they are, the Flosser Rally lights. These come in at 90 watts on low beam and 100 watts on high beam, compared to the 55 and 60 of the stock bulbs. And they're made in Germany, cost about 30 bucks for the pair. We will need to use relays with this, but with a combined total, this costs about 50 bucks. So let's get this setup installed. Swapping out the bulbs is straightforward. You'll notice I have these wiring adapters in order to use the H4 European lights. With the new bulbs installed, we can now install the relay harness. This consists of a pair of relays, a fused power link for the battery, and 2 hookups for the light bulbs themselves with built-in grounds. This is going to help with brightness since we're hooking directly to the battery and bypassing the car's stock wiring, but it's also a safety concern because these bulbs are about twice as powerful as the stock ones, and the stock wiring wasn't designed to handle that much load. Basically, the only tricky part of this installation is figuring out how to route the wires and where to mount the relays. Once you figure that out, you can hook up the positive wire to the battery, Find a spot on each side to ground the headlight sockets. Then plug in the bulbs. This harness plugs into the car on one side only, just so it knows when you're switching the headlights on. The other side stays unused, and because of this, you'll end up with a bulb out warning on the dash. This can be overcome by plugging in a resistor to this side, but for testing purposes, we don't really need to worry about it. Anyway, with all that done, let's hit the streets and see how these compare to the stock bulbs. And on first impression, these are great. Much better, much brighter. I can see further down the road, and they don't seem to get overpowered by other cars on the road. I was especially impressed with the high beam performance. Here are some comparison shots between these and the old bulbs. Of course, the camera doesn't quite do justice to how much better these really are, but you can try pausing the video at different points to see the difference. Well, that was a good test. I'm actually really impressed with those Flosser halogens. They're way brighter than the old bulbs, and I think I'd be totally content with that. I like that they're sort of the traditional warm white color, and the brightness, I think it's plenty for me for driving around town and country roads, but I would be remiss if I didn't test out some LEDs. So here they are. These are the top of the range bulbs made by Auxito. They're claimed to have 20,000 lumens for the set, but I really like the size of these. They'll be a direct fit, and they have built-in cooling fans. Price for the pair is about $80. There's a lot of aftermarket LEDs that have a huge heat sink on the back, so it's really refreshing to see these bulbs that are a pretty close size match to the original halogens. They also appear to have a good configuration for the high beam and low beam, which not all aftermarket bulbs have. That being said, you will probably have to use a pair of external resistors like these in order to cancel out the bulb out warning on the dash. So all in, you're looking at over $100 for an LED setup like this, or about double the price of the high wattage halogens and relays. So at this point you're probably wondering, how did I land on these particular bulbs out of the plethora of aftermarket LED bulbs out there? Well, the simple answer is I got them for free. Yeah, Auxito actually reached out to me and offered to send me a set of bulbs to test in a video. And I told them, well, I'm going to compare these against some really bright, high-powered halogens. And they were like, no problem. Completely unfazed. Sent me a pair of their best bulbs and a coupon code for you guys to use to save 15% on anything they make. And they make quite a few aftermarket LEDs for not just headlights, but brake light bulbs, turn signals, side markers, just about anything. So use my code, save 15%. But that doesn't mean I'm going to give them a free pass, so let's see how these do. As you might expect, installing these is just as easy as it was to replace the halogen bulbs. There's no need to use relays with these bulbs because they actually use less power than the stock bulbs. So I'll just plug these right back into the car's wiring, but I'll leave the relay harness in place, just disconnected, until I decide which bulbs I'm going to use on this car. In my case, the bulbs work fine without adding any of those extra resistors, but I do get that warning light on the dash, so it's probably a good idea to add these resistors since I got them anyway. The wiring's a bit short and I would want to find a better way to mount these, but for this quick test I'll just leave them hanging. And just like that, it solves the problem. So let's go for a drive and see how these perform. It'll probably be surprising to no one that these are bright. While I still don't really like this cool white color temperature, which I'll talk more about later, I have to admit these perform really well. I'm seeing further into the distance, I'm noticing pedestrians better. They seem to compete a lot better with all the other cars on the road and not get washed out. and on these quiet country roads I can see far into the distance. Crucially though, how do these compare to the Flosser rally lights? Well, it definitely looks like the LEDs are brighter on low beam. I think the color difference adds a new variable, but we'll remove that variable in a minute. First, look at these clips and let me know what you think. On high beam, I think the halogens actually take the cake, which is really impressive. I think this is where halogens have a design advantage because the high beam filament just shines in all directions with no obstruction and can really fill up the reflector. Anyway, I'm really curious how much of this comparison is influenced by how we perceive color. So I'm going to take color out of the equation by applying a black and white filter to this footage, and let's take a quick look at some of these clips again. While the result doesn't change, I think the LEDs are still the clear winners on low beam. It does show there's not as much of a difference between the two as you might have thought. And once again on high beam, I think the halogens have a slight advantage over the LEDs. Well, this has been a really interesting comparison. I think from a brightness perspective, the LEDs win. I'm really impressed by the technology of them. They have a lot of advantages over halogens. They're going to have a longer life, they're going to maintain their brightness over time, they cool themselves, they're less hard on the car's electrical system because they draw less power. There's a lot of good things going for them. But I feel like there's a bit of an arms race going on with headlights these days where everybody's trying to have the brightest possible headlights. I don't know if I want to live in a world like that, because I already feel like it hurts my eyes driving at night when 25% of cars have LED headlights. And I think part of it is our eyes are still not really used to blue light as humans. For thousands of years, we've sat around campfires, we've had candles and lanterns, and eventually incandescent light bulbs. And all of a sudden, we have all this blue light in our lives now, whether it's computer screens, phone screens, and now LED headlights. We already know that blue light is harsh for our eyes, and I don't understand why you can get different color temperatures in household LEDs, but almost nobody makes automotive LEDs in a warmer white color. And I, for one, would be much more likely to use them if you could get that, especially because I drive older cars. And I feel like it looks weird and out of place to use that cool white color in an older car like this. And for that reason, I think I'm actually going to stick with the halogens. Probably a surprising result for some of you. I'm using the bulbs that aren't quite as good as the modern technology. But I feel like they fit the overall personality of this car a lot better. And I'll probably save those LEDs and use them in something else, like maybe my Miata. Well, what do you guys think? Am I an idiot for not using the LEDs, or do you get where I'm coming from? Let me know in the comments. But in any case, I'm thankful to Auxito for sending me these bulbs to try out. I'm still very impressed with them. Don't forget to use my link and discount code IDoCarStuff if you want to save 15%. But with that, if you made it this far in the video, I will leave you with a song. I can see clearly now, my high beams are on. I can see all the critters that are in my way. The signs are reflecting in my retinas. better turn down for the oncoming traffic so they don't crash. But I can see clearly now, my high beams are on. I can see all the trash cans in the road. Go around corners while holding a tripod in one hand and steering wheel in the other hand. It's gonna be a bright halogen night. That was pretty good.